And we should be live. Thanks everyone for joining me and Sean for another Tea Time Tales chat, where our goal
Hi.
is to be just good enough at all times. um, so I'm joined. I would say as always, but I don't know if I can say that my very first, only the second episode of this whole series. But how you doing, Sean?
I'm good. How about you? I'm very conflicted at the moment, which we'll get to, I'm sure, over the course of conversation. But
Sure. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about in our main topic today, but before we get to that, I want to introduce our special guest. I feel a bit like Kieran the Shipwright with survivors of the first stage washing up on my shore, but I'd like to welcome Brian to the show. Hi, Brian. How you doing?
Hello. Well, I'm a little seasick from the journey, but I'm getting there.
How's podcast retirement treating you?
Well, let's see. Right about now is when we would have been scheduling our next episode to do anyway, so it actually doesn't feel much different.
Okay, fair.
Because
Sounds good.
where were we on, Sean? About a 2-3 month gap between episodes.
sure felt that way.
So today's main topic, unsurprisingly enough, is the big announcement of a digital version of Lord of the Rings, the card game. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today. First, though, we'll do kind of check-in of just what we've been playing or just thoughts about other news in the community before we get to that one. So I guess the big thing is the Fellowship event, and I believe you played in the Fellowship event as well, Brian. So how'd that go?
Well, so when we originally showed up, Sean said he was going to make some decks for us, and I believe we came with the plan of we were going to play something other than Assault on, or I don't even know what it's called.
Attack on Dol Guldur.
Attack on Dol Guldur. Thank you. And we ended up sitting down and decided to actually join a group regardless of what we knew to be our better instinct. So we sat down for, I think were there 6 of us, Sean? It was 3 groups of 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We didn't go full epic because we knew how that went. We at least tried to find a middle ground.
Which I believe several other people were doing at the event as well. So I was kind of thinking, well, you know what, if I'm going to give this one a shot, people seem to think that going with 2-player teams is going to be the way to do it. But we actually, the first 3 rounds, I would say, we actually did fairly decently. You and I did, at least. I feel like we had things under control, and then it just everything went to hell like in an instant. I think with one fell swoop we lost 5 of our 6 heroes.
Ouch.
It was messy. It was just gross is really what it was.
Yeah, it was a massacre. And honestly, like we were keeping our board state somewhat defended, but we were not questing successfully. We made like 3 progress over the course of 3 turns.
Yeah.
So I knew where the wind was blowing.
Yeah, I think that's about how it goes for that quest.
But after that, we turned on Kirith Ungol, which is one of my favorite quests that's come out of in modernity. And Brian, I know we lost that one, but would you not feel that it was a good loss? That's one I would
No,
find
stupid. I hated it. No, it was good. I do not like losing in that game, which is something that I just need to personally reconcile with. But yeah, that
It was a fair loss, though. Like
it was a fair loss, and
lost.
I got to drop what's the name of that card, Sean?
Oh yes, you had the most epic Justice Shall Be Done turn. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spit out like 4 additional allies. I dropped. So I can't remember everything that even went down, but it was my board state went from my 3 heroes to being like unmanageably complicated because I just got the right cards at the right time.
And then what happened? And then a shadow effect increased your threat by 2 and threaded you out before you got to use any of it. It was amazing.
It's a stupid game for stupid people.
Sounds like an experience.
How'd yours go, Ian?
For my part, I was playing with our friend Casey, who we know from Gen Con and Arkham and various things, and then also Matt and Justin, who I play with every year. So the first game was okay. Uh, I was kind of playing the Aragorn Rohirrim deck I was talking about, but we just got. It was basically one of those games where it was all enemies, and we were actually begging for locations, even though we were all worried about locations originally. And I think we got the shadow where the enemy makes an additional attack, which is like a table flipper, but we got that like 3 times within the first couple of rounds. So basically, long story short, we were 4 heroes down at the end of round 2. So that was a bit rough.
It's a
And
good start.
yeah. So needless to say, we didn't survive. We scooped, tried again, and then we got the opposite problem, which is we started getting like every Dol Guldur location in the deck, and kind of my murder machine and the other combat decks were we just were clearing the board every turn, but we just couldn't get the willpower going. So, yep, another big loss. But part of the problem was that we had 10 people total. So enough for kind of like 2 groups of 4 and a group of 2. We could have distributed it differently, but the problem was that there were 2 players who were fairly new to the game there, and then the rest were very experienced, and it was just like these events are not well tailored for that. So what we tried to do is send like basically mix up the groups a bit, so we would integrate the new players into like groups that were kind of more experienced, but it's still asking a lot for them to like grab some decks that they don't totally know how to pilot and face like the hardest scenario in the game so far. It's yeah, I just kind of felt bad. We were trying to reassure him that the loss was not his fault at all.
I was seeing a lot of discussion over that in the Discord, and I'm guessing it was related to that very topic. But a lot of people just saying that, you know, these fellowship events should be bringing people together, and the way to do that is not to bring a scenario that's going to make new players feel like they are completely out of control. Boy, I would have never thought about that perspective, but yeah, that would, like, if I were new to the game, that would ruin it for me. I wouldn't even attempt to come back.
So you're saying it's not inviting when you just get blasted in the face?
It's true. It is not.
No.
That's a slow, violent build you got to work for, you know?
Okay, can we not
years.
extend the metaphor here?
To the breaking point. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in the early days of the game, it was this kind of funny thing, like the Gen Con quest is hard and it's gonna just destroy you, like, and we had Massing at Osgiliath and then Battle of Lake Town, but I almost feel like it was more okay back then because the card pool was small enough that everyone was kind of at the same level.
Yeah, there were like 12 decks that you could possibly play.
Yeah, and even if you lost, it was kind of just like a fun experience in it together. But now we're at the point where like there's such a broad range. You could have someone with like just the core set and maybe one adventure pack playing alongside someone with the whole card pool against these quests that are like harder than they've ever been. So I almost feel like there should be a shift. Like, okay, we did the thing where the special quest was gonna be like amazingly punishing each year, but now we have Nightmare, we have plenty of difficult stuff. I feel like the focus now should just be on something fun, like just weird, like wacky ideas for the special event quest should be the main thing, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to see them lean a little bit harder on concepts that kind of bend the format of the game, like epic multiplayer as a whole, not necessarily attaching epic multiplayer always to these brutally hard quests, but just kind of exploring stuff like that you can only really do at a big meetup.
Right.
That's where I think the strength will be.
I feel like Prancing Pony was kind of the perfect example of that. Like it was pretty challenging, but it wasn't super punishing, and it was just like, oh, like we're gonna put Clue into Lord of the Rings the card game. Like it's just a new kind of idea to explore, which is kind of what I'd like to see.
Or Belagast, I think, is probably my high mark, where it's a hard quest, don't get me wrong, but they made it interesting by introducing kind of the loot and the kind of that really dungeon crawly feel. So just kind of leaning into stuff like that, I think, is the way forward, not just blasting players in the face with the new ball buster.
Yeah. Welcome to the game. Smash. Okay, so I think we can transition into our main topic, which is the big news that was announced at the Fellowship event at the Fantasy Flight Game Center, which is a digital. Well, I don't want to say a digital version of our game. It's more like a digital version based on our game. But Lord of the Rings Living Card Game, I believe is the official name, was announced, and you guys were both there to see the actual announcement, if I'm not mistaken. So how was the reaction in the actual room? Because I know what the reaction on the internet was like. But,
night and day. Night and
Yeah.
day. Everyone at the event center seemed really excited and upbeat and positive. I think there's a lot to be said for the positivity that being there in person just naturally generates. Because you get to feel the energy of the people around you, whereas watching it online is definitely a different experience. But no, I think everybody was excited. There was the random slew of people who were asking, like someone asked the direct question of, is this going to stop development on this other completely unrelated game project?
Yes.
And Caleb was just like, yeah, I don't know, man. But I think people were pretty positive for the most part.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it was a little weird. The dynamic was just a tad weird because they had this presentation area set up, but it didn't start.
Yeah.
The presentation didn't start, so people had already been mulling around. We had already started our game. So like there was this kind of weird partition between the people who had actually come up into the little presentation area versus everyone who was still back at the game tables. And it just kind of made for a weird audience.
And so they had, I don't know if you could see it very well on the stream or not, but they actually had chairs set up for people to sit in, like a classic announcement presentation. And so Caleb is coming around asking people to come sit in the chairs, but he's doing it in a way that he's trying to be like cool about it. It's like it was super obvious he wants people to come up and sit in the chairs, but we were kind of sitting there like, well, I don't want to leave my table. I got my phone, my wallet here, and all that stuff. But eventually we decided we needed to be good audience members, so we went up and sat up there. Yeah, it was like people had already started their games. I mean, we were probably I think we were already around in, right, Sean? We had reached our break with the other two groups.
Yeah, we had finished our first round.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how the timing was going to work on that with how they're going to interrupt games. It would have been super amusing if they were doing their announcement to a sea of open chairs.
Right.
Gathered around.
And then I know that one of my other favorite details is how they scheduled the fellowship event for the exact same time that the actual game center opens. So there's people standing outside in cold Minnesota weather. I got there like 20 minutes early because I was like, I want to go find a good table and, just kind of find a good little place to crash, maybe do a little shopping before I actually sit down and play. Nope, I'm going to go sit in my car, I guess, and continue to add carbon emissions into the atmosphere.
Yeah, I think that was just kind of a weird thing with the communication on the event because registration started at 10. I think the event technically didn't start till 11, but that just got all confused.
That makes sense.
Clearly, I mean, I spaced that out too. I showed up 5 minutes early.
Yeah.
Which is 5 minutes earlier than I'm normally to places.
Well, and it's just, if you're expecting people at 10, I don't know, open the doors a little early. Come on. We don't have to be Ebenezer Scrooge about this.
Yeah. So, not surprisingly, some rough logistics, it sounds like.
Yeah. But, I would say overall, the reaction was really, really positive. It was kind of cool to see the energy of the presenters. Everyone was really excited about it. Like, Caleb has kept a lid on this so well. Because we're friends with Caleb personally, so we will talk to him about things from time to time, and he's not like spewing spoilers left and right, but he'll talk in vague terms sometimes about things he's working on.
Sure.
And I had no clue at all that
we could not get this one out of him, not whatsoever. Excuse me.
Yeah, I feel like, and there's been some rough history lately with FFG and leaks, like whole deluxe expansions being leaked for games, etc. But this was nothing. The only thing was the day before, and this will kind of go into my experience, and we can talk about like our own personal reactions to the news. The day before on Friday, I can't even remember what blog it was. It was some blog. basically was saying, "Oh, Fantasy Flight Interactive, the new digital division, is gonna have a big announcement tomorrow morning." So we're all kind of like, "Okay, they're not gonna have two big announcements on a Saturday morning."
Yeah.
Obviously,
There's a
this
Venn diagram here.
yeah, obviously this means the Lord of the Rings announcement has to be digital related, which was the first time that like totally took me by surprise of what it was gonna be.
We were sitting next to some people that brought that up as well, and I can't believe I had not heard that theory before. Like all the discussions that people have been having about what this announcement was going to be, and that was the very first time I heard the possibility that it could be a digital edition. And because as soon as they said it, I was like, of course that's it. Of course that's the answer. That makes the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know even in our last episode of Teatime's Tales chat, Sean, where we were discussing what it could be, I think maybe Digital Idea was briefly mentioned, and I kind of dismissed it. I don't remember because I do remember
that was. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I do remember a few people like mentioning that idea here and there on Twitter, and I quickly like shot that down, said that's not what it's gonna be. So I'm sorry to those people because I was wrong. I was big time wrong.
I think we were discussing that kind of on the pretense that it was going to be a straight digital port of the tabletop game, which is not essentially what got announced. So, I don't think you're totally wrong, and I think clearly taking the digital or the tabletop game and porting it, mechanic for mechanic isn't something they were interested in doing, because probably of all the reasons that we thought it wouldn't be a good idea. It's a really complex game to try to get programming for, I imagine.
Yeah, so I was totally not expecting digital, so I guess my own personal reaction, my thoughts have changed since then, but my initial reaction on Saturday morning...
Have they changed, Ian?
I'm listening to you very closely here to make sure you represent yourself properly.
Well, we'll get into that. So my honest initial reaction on Saturday morning was disappointment more than anything else, because I was not expecting digital, so I had all this time since Caleb had spilled the beans on Cardboard of the Rings that there was an announcement coming up. And I think people have actually like gone back and ran the tape, and he didn't say it was specifically Lord of the Rings card game. He just said a Lord of the Rings announcement. So very sneaky of Caleb. But of course, that's what we all interpreted. I know that's what I did. So I was just imagining all these like cool new expansions for the physical game. And so I think when it turned out to be digital, it wasn't anything about the product itself. For me, it was like, this wasn't what I wanted. I had pictured some other thing. And so I just fell into a natural disappointment right away, I think. Which I think is where a lot of the community was at.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think you were alone. I felt like I was paying attention to, we kind of have a large group chat for the kind of the old COTR Brain Trust, and then we've got our Discord, and then I think I was on the Reddit, and I was paying attention to those places, and the reaction was kind of mixed, and there was a lot of people being what I thought was unnecessarily negative about what is essentially a pure value add. Because, this announcement essentially means that we get Lord of the Rings 2.0, but it doesn't mess with 1.0. So everybody wins. And I just don't understand how many people were just mad about that.
I think there's too many people were making assumptions, and they're absolutely fair assumptions. But I think the biggest concern is that this is going to strip away development time, power, and resources from the card game itself. You take the negative, the super negative approach of they are going to pour all of their good development and resources into this digital game because that's where the money's really going to come in, without printing delays, shipping delays, and all of that. And so they're going to take Caleb, for instance, and put him on that, and they're just going to dump low level nobody to be in charge of the card game from now on. So I think that's what people are all worried about, and I totally understand. They're valid concerns, but they're based in zero evidence. We have nothing. Yeah, we have nothing to support that idea. And while it's totally okay to be worried about that, what I saw was a level of vitriol against the company for betraying the card game, betraying the audience by not making an announcement related to the card game itself, when first of all, it is related. I mean, yes, this is a new game. To pretend like they are completely separate ideas is ludicrous. I mean, they're incredibly related, and FFG, Caleb, whoever you want to pin this on, would have been well within their rights to claim that this was a big announcement about the card game. And that for me was the big issue, is just seeing these people who were so angry, like they personally felt like they had been stabbed in the face by this company. When the company didn't do no, we're done with the blasting.
No more blasting.
They hadn't done anything wrong, and I was just so. I honestly, what I'm dancing around is there is a stereotype out there that exists that applies toward video gamers and board gamers in people feeling entitled, and I felt like that was on full display that day. Not to say that the concerns aren't warranted, just that people acted like they had personally been wronged by an announcement that, by all rights, if they don't like the video game, you just don't play it. And this means nothing for you ultimately. That's like the worst you should really feel about it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if the community was split, which I don't even want to say community, because kind of what I noticed is the people who are most conflicted were actually like the most hardcore base of the game, who have been, like have the full collection, have been following it for a long time. Because if you look at, say, Facebook, well, maybe not Facebook, because that group has its own salt sometimes, but if you look at like just general Reddit board game strands, kind of community forums that aren't just for the hardcore player base, they were all
without
like,
a prior investment.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, this is amazing." Yes. But among the kind of hardcore player base, the ones who were I'd say of the ones who are kind of quote unquote against the announcement at first, I think it was split between the people who are in my camp who are just like disappointed and I just need time to process. It's kind of like almost mourning something you never had. Like, these were the things I thought I was going to get, and I didn't get it, even though it never existed. I'm going to be sad about it for a little bit and go be emo in my corner for a while. And then, yeah, I think there was also the portion that was just like salt levels to extreme, and the, you know, taking it to that level, which I'm not too surprised about, because people were taking it to that level over errata. My God, like saying they were going to sell their collection on eBay because heroes got their text changed, you know?
And that at least makes more sense to me, because that's altering the game that people... Yeah, because that's altering the game that people know and love currently. This one doesn't. Like, this announcement doesn't change the game you already love.
It does not.
Well,
no.
And I think a lot of people are worried that it, you know, like you mentioned, it will affect, and it's, you know, it's a valid concern, and I agree. But can we save the anger and the worry for when we actually see that happen?
Yes,
like
exactly.
no, people get so
we can't,
angry
Sean.
over
This
all
is the internet.
I mean, I wanted to think that the LOTR community was a little bit better than that, but I know it's hard to kind of pull back and be like, all right, well, maybe we'll address problems when they actually arise. But I don't know, man. I think this is only good news. FFG, they've yet to put out an LCG that hasn't turned my head. They seem to do a pretty good job of throwing resources where they need to go. I don't know. I'm positive for it. It's going to be a really cool streamlined experience. And I remember, you know, Brian, you and I were talking about this, like the whole time we were sitting through that presentation. It was like, Oh, Brian, it's like, Caleb, listen to everything you said, everything you ever bitched about in the tabletop game, and it's like, all right, well, let's fix this.
Yeah, so like Caleb was kind of running through these bullet points as to the differences you were going to experience in the digital game, and I could see Sean would look at me every single time he said something. And I was sitting there trying not to have this, like, you know, shit-eating grin on my face, because it's exactly what it is. It's like every single thing that I've griped about in that game. And that then prompted, Sean sent me a quick message or something. I think he said something to that effect in Discord or something along the lines of, it's like they heard everything Brian ever said and changed it, which then prompted me to ask the direct question, are there going to be 30 card decks?
Yeah, so I said, like, oh, geez, I wonder if there are going to be 30 card decks, and immediately Brian's hands goes up.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that speaks to kind of what I was saying, where I think, of course, they want the like hardcore player base to be on board. But I feel like I feel like basically this digital game has obviously a way bigger target potential audience
Yes.
than the physical game does.
Absolutely.
Because the barrier of entry is so low. Like, you download a program on your computer and hopefully eventually phone, compared to investing in a core set and sorting all these cards, and just the way that it is going to be streamlined. I think there are a lot of, people I have seen in various posts along the way who said they were into Lord of the Rings at one time or another, but had to get out for various reasons, the difficulty or the because it requires you to deck build all the time for each quest. And so I think a lot of those people might be drawn back into that, and some people who have never even heard of the game in the first place.
I mean, and that's me. That's why I'm here, is because I will be playing Lord of the Rings again.
All of a sudden, Brian's interested. Isn't that, God, that's how it worked for me too. We retire from COTR, then all of a sudden LTR seems really appealing.
Right. It's but I mean that's exactly it. I said this many times, and I apologize to Sean, who's had to hear this probably 40 times, but I could not imagine any announcement that they could have made at this event. I mean, so I went to this event because I wanted the playmat. Let's not pretend like it was something more noble than that. That is the sickest playmat they've released, and I absolutely wanted it. So that's why I went. And then I found out they were doing this announcement. So I was like, all right, cool. I can stick around and, support my friend Caleb and hang out with Sean, whatever. I expected this to be some dumb announcement about some new freaking expansion pack that I couldn't care less about. And so I cannot imagine an announcement they could have put out that actually would have gotten me excited at the most, to even care at a minimum level. And they managed to get me so excited about something that for the first time in like 3 years, I was actually excited to play the card game again. It didn't last, but it happened.
It lasted for about 3/4 of a quest.
Yeah, it didn't go well, but that was, I mean, that's huge. Like I'm drawn back in. I suddenly care about the development cycle again. And yeah, like Sean said, it suddenly makes me be like, dang it, why'd we leave the podcast? I'd have something to talk about again.
Yeah, totally. And I think now all the different community contributors are like, how much are we going to cover this digital thing? It's a whole new world, so people are trying to figure out how to deal with it. But I do think, like going back to something Sean said earlier, that one of the things people were predicting is like, oh, is this going to be 2.0? Which I think was always an outside chance. I think rebooting a whole game in a cooperative game would be asking a lot, to ask people to collect everything again. And I think there are definitely things that I would argue could be better in this game. I mean, it came out like 6 years ago, so obviously there's been some advancement in how people design these LCGs, but probably not enough to just reboot the whole entire game. But with this digital thing, it's almost like we're getting to see, I mean, obviously with some differences because this is digital, so you're not doing everything you would in tabletop, but we're getting to see some of the changes they might have done in a 2.0, I feel like.
Simultaneous attacks.
So I think before we get to the point where I'm joining the kind of hype train, still in my disappointment zone a couple of days ago, along with just the disappointment of them announcing something I didn't expect, and maybe some sky is falling fear that they were going to shut down Octagon, which is something I was worried about, and maybe I'm not as worried about now. But the other segment of it is, sometimes when I hear the word Streamlined, I get nervous. I get nervous that Streamlined is going to mean that it's like too simplistic, that there's not, because I want there to be enough strategy for me to really sink my teeth into to make it worth coming back to. And so part of me was like, is this just going to be like, kind of the elephant in the room? Is this just like them trying to make something similar to Hearthstone and capture that market, and it's going to be too simplistic in that way? Those were kind of the initial thoughts going through my head.
I think that's a totally valid concern. And I mean, based on what I did not catch the stream yesterday, so I cannot speak to the how it
So
actually
bitter
played out.
about
But
that.
I would certainly worry about that myself, because it seems very obvious that they are trying to, capture the spirit of Hearthstone and what makes that game successful. With that said, they've got Caleb's involvement, and I think if we have learned one thing about Caleb's development style over the last 4 years, whatever it's been, I don't think he's interested in bringing us a simple experience that's just going to be a completely dumbed down.
Yeah.
Here's the card I drew. I will now put it on the table and I will use that card. I believe that he will be able to introduce and inject depth into the game. We may not see it right away. I think that's the other thing I would want people to remember. That at that point, I feel like I'm just starting to be an apologist for a game that doesn't even exist yet. But
No, you're just fighting the people who are hating a game that doesn't.
Right, right. They're probably going to start simple, and the complexity will come later, because as natural with anything, you want to get people hooked on what the core idea is, and then you can introduce complexity as it ages and succeeds. So it's probably not, the first rendition we see is not going to be probably representative of what the game will look like in a year. That's my guess, at least.
Well, and you could say that very, very easily about the core set for the physical game. Like, it's not a deep core set as far as deck building goes.
Oh, definitely not.
So I don't think anyone has a leg to stand on if they're hating on the digital version, comparing it to the physical version, because it's a new game.
Yeah. And that was actually part of what started making me feel better. Saturday started creeping on, and I woke up on Sunday.
You were one of like 4 separate people across those venues that I was watching who said something akin to this. Is it just me, or does this card game sound like a better idea now?
It really does in the light of day.
It was magical to see.
Some days you wake up thinking back on the past day and you feel worse about it, but in this case I was feeling better about what had happened. And part of that was that same thought. I was thinking, if this was just some new digital interactive team designing this all by themselves, which I'm sure they're all experienced and great people, but I wouldn't feel as confident about it because they don't know the game intimately. But the fact that Caleb has worked on this for a long time and has been like an integral part of designing it, I was like, okay, I feel better about that. Like, despite, there are times when I disagree with a design decision Caleb has made. Like, that's true of any designer of any game ever. I'm not going to 100% agree with everything they do. But, if I look at my favorite cycles of the game, it's the past few cycles. It's since Caleb started designing the game. So I have faith in his abilities as a designer, and I don't think he is going to just create some like dumbed down product that doesn't have the soul of the original game. And I think absolutely when I was going over that in my head, that's what started making me feel better about it.
Well, and I think the whole dumbed down worry was one that was pretty common among the people who were worrying. But I mean, the bottom line to me is this is a different venue. It's destined for computer, mobile, and it's meant to be something different from the physical game. Like 15-20 minutes is what you want in that. And you know what? As much as I love Lord of the Rings, there are times where I put down a game after 2 hours and it's just like, I can't do any more right now. So there's definitely something to be said, even if the game does lose a little bit of its depth for concise, strong pacing in a shorter game as compared to something a little bit more long form.
Yeah, definitely.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah. And I did happen to catch the stream. It's too bad they didn't archive it. I think probably there was just, since it's a brand new Twitch channel, I think someone just forgot to check the box that lets you archive.
That's literally what happened. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
As someone who's maintained 3 separate Twitch channels.
Yeah. So they have said they will be archiving the next one, and they're actually going to be doing bi-weekly streams, so on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so there's going to be tons of info coming out, apparently. So I guess we can kind of transition into talking about the game itself and what we're actually excited about if we're ready to move on past the salt. but in terms of the salt, one thing I will mention is the person running the stream was Luke, who's the community manager for Fantasy Flight Interactive. I think he did a great job on the stream. And specifically, it's obvious that they are paying attention to the community reaction, because at the end of the stream, he really hammered home like some specific points that people have been worried or salty about. So obviously they've been reading some
Such
threads.
as?
Because he was saying this is not meant in any way to take away from the physical game, that their whole goal is to bring more people into the sphere, and hopefully people will get funneled into the game, that the physical game, if they have their way, will continue for a long time. And he even specifically addressed that Caleb's time will not be taken away from the physical game because of this, and they're not like, their whole thing is not to take Caleb away from the physical game and just use him for the digital game. So they kind of really addressed those specific concerns, I felt like, which was a good look on their part, I think, is paying attention to those things.
And I mean, and ultimately, even if this ends up being a runaway success and Caleb gets devoted to it full time, like, what reason has FFG given us in the Lord of the Rings community to doubt that they wouldn't put, you know, remaining development of the physical game into the hands of someone really capable?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I mean, can we not get angry about that before it happens?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I don't know how many people will come into the physical game because of the digital game, but if it's more than zero, like, I feel like that's a net win for the physical game at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the actual game, kind of what are the things that you're most excited about, or anything you wanted to mention that stood out to you?
I was 100% thrilled when they announced that this would not be a random pack microtransaction ridden beast.
Yeah. Yes.
The fact that it is truly a living card game, and it is living up to that pedigree in its pricing model. Like, obviously, I expect then that the packs are going to be a little bit more on the expensive side, but at the end of the day, that's fine with me. I will give you honest money for honest cards, and then as long as it's a game I enjoy, I feel good about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people were partly nervous about these favor cards, which sound like they're effects that just kind of one-time effects that you can pay for with either the in-game currency that you earn, which is Valor, or paying it with real money, and they're just kind of like effects that go off and make the game easier. But from what they were mentioning on the stream, it sounds like it's almost like a way for people, you don't even have to use them, but if you want an easier experience, then people can kind of access those. So another way to potentially make it accessible. And I think at the end of the day, they do have to think about how they're going to make money off of it. So
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's a balance to strike. I do think that people have a right to be cautiously worried that the balance is not going to be right. But the best way to deal with that is not to bitch about it before you've even seen it. It's to get in that beta, communicate with FFG. It sounds like they're being really open and transparent, and they want to make this a really good game that people are going to get excited about. So, like, that's how we exact that change. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm very, very thrilled about the pricing model, and I look forward to seeing how it's going to work out.
I'm optimistic about the pricing model. I'm cautiously optimistic about what that price point is going to be, kind of as you said. You know, it's very easy for corporate greed to set in on a product like this, and I think we all just, you know, be wary, obviously, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't think I've always found FFG's pricing on their games to actually be quite reasonable. I think when you look at, you know, paying $15 for a pack of cards, ultimately, it feels expensive. But when you realize the grander scheme that those cards fit into, you know, it's a little easier to kind of swallow what you're taking down there. I am my concern is because they haven't done this before that they may price themselves into a bad place. They could go the complete opposite way, where they end up making it cheaper than they actually need to. So it could go both ways. My worry is that they will go toward the more expensive side, but at the end of the day, as Sean said, if they charge $100, the fact is I know exactly what I'm getting, and I can decide if I want to spend that $100. So I like that. I think the model itself is, based on what we know so far, going to be a really, really good one. And just hopefully they'll back it up with a dollar sign that kind of corresponds with what people are willing to put into it.
Yeah, it sounded like from the stream yesterday, because a few people were asking, like, of course, people want to know all the details right away, but asking kind of about exact price points, and it sounds like they themselves do not have that model figured out. So I think even as we start going through beta and get more details figured out, I think the community can actually have an impact on that. Like if they announce some crazy price point and then everyone freaks out, I think more than likely they'd probably back down from it. It sounds like, at least at this point. But
I mean, they'd have to. That's going to be their market analysis. So they're gonna have.
Yeah, for sure. So what were the things, because you mentioned this got you excited, Brian, what were the things kind of from the announcement that stood out to you that were really...
I think it's honestly, my answer is just the whole thing, which is so stupid,
sure, that's fair.
I think it's really just, honestly, this announcement was catered for what I'm looking for in a game like this. I stopped playing the card game because of its complexity, and they're just changing all of that. So we get to experience the theme that I want to experience when I'm playing a game like this. And I'm going to get to apply that toward I know the word makes you nervous, but a more streamlined approach toward the game. And I think that just, honestly, it's everything I complained about. It's changed. We have simultaneous attacks now, which I think sounds great, because that's something I've been harping on since day one. I think the thing that I was the most excited about, which sounds so stupid, is the non-resource match. Which Sean and I were talking about that if I were to play the physical game again, I think I would try and adapt that rule into how I play. As Sean pointed out, the card game itself does not limit your card pool based on type. So I think you'd have to introduce that rule as well, that you can't include an off-color card in your deck anymore. Sure. But there was some things like that just sounded really good. I really like the idea that it's not going to be this randomized encounter experience, because even though the game will obviously be fully capable of screwing you over, this sets up the possibility for us to introduce a legitimate easy, medium, hard difficulty structure. It gives the developers so much more control over how the game is going to play against you. I think that's probably ultimately the most exciting part, is just it's going to be a game designed. It can truly function the way that it's designed to function, instead of having to kind of cram these card designs in that need to work in a random pool and work with previous iterations of, existing player cards and encounter cards. That was a really long-winded way of saying, I think that's the part I'm most excited about. It's just the intentional design that the game will now have full control over the experience it's going to give you.
Yeah, the Sauron AI is interesting. That was another portion that was kind of iffy about at first, because I'm kind of weird in a way that part of the reason why I like tabletop games, and I think another reason why I was a little bit disappointed, is I just don't do much digital gaming at all anymore. I pretty much play board games digitally if I'm doing anything digitally. So Octagon,
where should I send your ARP card?
So it's like, in a lot of ways, one of the reasons I like tabletop games, or say Lord of the Rings or Arkham with their encounter decks, is I know what goes into them. I know how they're operating. And for some reason, it's weird, like knowing that there's a Sauron AI and I don't know exactly what's going into that made me nervous at first. But once I started getting excited about the game, I was maybe at a 6, and then once I saw the stream yesterday, I feel like I'm at a 10. Like it looks really
Oh
really
wow,
good. Yeah,
great.
and
You know,
specifically the Sauron AI, kind of rounding out the point, because seeing how it works, like obviously we didn't get to see a ton, but kind of going along with what you're saying, Brian, I like the fact that it can react to players, because a problem in the physical game is it can either just gut punch you right away and you have no control if you get hit with the wrong treachery or
yes,
whatever, or you run away with the game and the game can't really react to that.
right.
In theory, this Sauron AI can deal with both of those problems because it can match your pace basically.
That's exactly it. Is your concern that you listed there about kind of you don't know what goes into it and how it's going to make its decisions. I totally get that, and that's one of the things about video games that can be really irritating. You're kind of just trusting that the game is in fact randomizing a deck, for instance, things
Right.
like that. But in this case, they're being very upfront about the idea that it is not a random effect necessarily. And I trust the fact that we have someone like Caleb in there who's going to use that opportunity again they're not going to program this Sauron AI to just decimate you the way that the card game can by complete chance. It's going to be designed to create a proper flow in the game, or they're going to have some sort of setting in there for, nightmare difficulty where the computer is going to do everything it possibly can to stop you.
Let's not pretend that's the AI. You can still get like a 5-card surge train when you've shuffled the encounter deck in the physical game. That's it's just a thing.
No, that's exactly what I mean, though. But now they can control it so that if you indicate, I just kind of want a more easygoing experience, the game is not going to throw a 5x surge effect at you, because they know that that's a frustrating experience. It's a necessary evil in the card game, and it's one that they can control now through the digital interface. I just think it's going to be top notch. I hope.
Yeah, one of the things I'm most excited about, I think, is just in addition to the Soren AI being able to match your pace, just the pacing feels different. So while there's things included that still feel like the physical game, the whole pace feels different because of the simultaneous combat, and there's only 2 phases. So
Yes.
I feel like there's going to be interesting decisions, because watching it played, it's like during that phase, you have to decide, okay, am I going to use this character's willpower to try to put progress on this objective, or am I going to deal with the enemies? So kind of the same decisions you have to make in the physical game, right? But you're doing it all at once within the same phase.
You could say it's a streamlined process, couldn't you?
Sure could.
And the other thing that I'm excited that they seem to have retained is the focus on heroes as kind of your main characters, and how they kind of inform primarily your deck building. Because that's something I've always really enjoyed about Lord of the Rings, is when I play games like this where we have dudes and we smash them together, any of those type of card games, I get really, probably like inordinately attached to my dudes. I like my characters. I like to build them up. I like them to do cool things. So I'm really glad that focus on heroes is going to be a constant.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I feel like it's going to be even more focused on heroes than the physical game. Because of the simultaneous combat, I don't think you're going to be able to build up your your ally swarms as much, because even just watching the stream, your allies, because their hit points are so low and they're getting attacked every time they attack, like they're just dying off, which is actually interesting, because sometimes ally swarm is not my favorite thing about the physical game. Like, I like the focus on the heroes, which I think is going to come through.
Yeah, it's honestly my least favorite thing about the physical card game. The whole turtle and build giant boards type.
Sure.
Like, sure, it makes sense for a card game mechanically, but if we're talking about theme, I guess, I don't know, small groups of characters just makes more sense to me. And it also makes the board more manageable and less brain burny. And Yeah, no, I think it's going to keep it way more in balance, where the encounter deck doesn't have to have like these major board wipey type treacheries just to try to keep the game in parity if you're running away with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, a couple other things I noticed they introduced in the stream, which I'm super excited about, is selective mulligans. So just ditch the cards you don't want.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a civilized world to live in.
Yes. So along with the 30 card decks, I think that'll be a lot to help your consistency.
Guys, have you guys seen the movie Paycheck?
Yeah, sadly, yes.
I have not.
Okay.
But...
First of all, how dare you? That movie. Okay, so the basic concept of Paycheck is Ben Affleck is a guy who gets like paid under the table to reverse engineer stuff, and then they wipe his memory after he's done working on it, so that he has complete plausible deniability if they ever go to court.
Nice.
I am convinced that I actually designed this game and that they wiped my brain. Because everything I'm hearing is just like, this is what I would have designed.
God.
It really is.
Who's your Uma Thurman?
I'm not prepared to take this analogy that far.
And another concern of mine that got addressed is I worried that the cards would be like, it'd almost be a whole entirely new card pool and nothing would seem familiar. But I think it's really cool that it seems like they are kind of translating the abilities to this new game. For example, the new core Aragorn, you pay a resource to ready him, which is very similar to his tabletop ability. Gimli, when he gets attacked, he gets +2 attack until the end of the turn. So they're just kind of translating those abilities in a way that I think is cool.
Good. Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't wait to get my hands on the early access. Normally I hear I mean, Sean, I don't know if you even noticed this, but as soon as they said Steam early access, I started rolling my eyes out of the back of my skull because you hear the terms early access and I immediately just think, oh, F you guys, you're just trying to get my money for an unfinished product and blah, blah, blah. But I'm really excited for this one. Caleb was going around making what felt like a very heartfelt plea to like, please get in there. He wants to hear comments from people. He wants feedback. And that got me even more excited.
Yep. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that that's they're really going to be receptive to feedback, because it's going to be really cool to see the community kind of be able to shape this in a little bit of in our own way. But you know, as a first foray into this space goes, I don't know that they could have picked a better niche to hit, because they're right, there is no cooperative digital card game out there that I'm aware of, and that excites me to no end, because I always choose co-op over competitive. And you know, I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh, it's Hobbit Stone, but I mean, if you're gonna take cues from another competitor, why not make it the king of the genre? It doesn't offend me that much. And I know, like Ian, we you know, you and I were talking about that, and at this point, I've gone back and downloaded Hearthstone because it just created an itch that I needed to scratch, and it's my only way to do it.
Yeah, that was part of another. There's a lot of things that went into my recipe of disappointment at first, but one of the things were just the aesthetics, and how it looked very similar to Hearthstone. And then you convinced me to download it as part of research, which I did, and I found myself spending way more time on that than I wanted to. But yeah, again, I think the aesthetics are something that they are. You know, this is all like pre-alpha stuff that we're seeing even on the stream, so this is not the finished product. So potentially, even though some of these aesthetics look rough, that might not be what it ends up looking like completely at the end of the day. So potentially,
I've got faith. I think we're going to see a great product.
I think so too. Yeah, after what I saw on the stream, and this community engagement is something I'm actually not used to from FFG, but Fantasy Flight Interactive, like doing these bi-weekly streams, and they are definitely pushing this hardcore, which makes sense because this is their first their first go. They have a lot riding on
Yeah.
this. You know,
Yeah.
we may think we have a lot riding on it, but they definitely do as well. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I hadn't thought about that either. But yeah, we are already seeing a level of community involvement that's kind of unknown with FFG in general. They're just so secretive about their projects, and I think there's a double-edged sword there. It's great that we as players will have the opportunity to present our thoughts, but it can also create more butthurt when people don't get their ideas through, and then they start complaining on forums. But I think that's a risk worth taking with this project, and I think ultimately the positive voices are easily going to outweigh the negatives by the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think if this is a good game, then people will eventually just come around to it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's what we're getting. I have no reason to believe it's not. Every LCG, despite my best efforts, has gotten me to enjoy it. So I don't see why this one's going to be any different. And I'm actually very interested to see what Caleb does with this game when he builds it from the ground up, because he inherited a legacy of weird rules things from the prior developers when he took over the physical game. So it'll be interesting to see how he applies that in developing this new one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm fully prepared not to love everything I see or like every decision, but again, yeah, I hope through the early access I'm able to influence some things, and not everything will be how I like it. That's true of the physical game as well, for sure. But as long as it has enough of the soul of the physical game, for lack of a better word, then I think I'll be excited and happy to go forth with it. So, any last thoughts, guys, before we sign off?
I'm amped.
Yeah, nothing but excitement here, both for what this means for the digital realm and this new card game, and what that ultimately means for the physical card game. Because I do think there's only synergy to be had, because they're occupying such different spaces. But I mean, the cross promotion is real, and couple with that the fact that we are in probably the next year or two looking at a new spin on the Lord of the Rings in a TV show like Thrones, and all of the attention that's gonna throw on stuff like this. Like, ooh, man, the potential energy here is just huge.
Yeah, I mean, those movies came out almost 20 years ago now. Like, it's been a long time, and to bring in new blood, to bring in a fresh perspective for people who don't know Lord of the Rings, it's going to be huge. And now they've got a new product to capitalize on it. It's just going, it's what Sean keeps saying. It's only good news. Yes, I think there are potential negatives, but we have no evidence to believe those negatives are actually going to come into effect yet. So until we start to see evidence that this is actually going to do any harm, I think all we have is positive indications and a really, really great path to go down. I hope that we do not I hope they don't betray that expectation, but I just trust that company I trust Caleb to attach his name to a product that he's excited about. And you know when he's lying, you just do. And he seems really excited about this, and that makes me excited for it.
All right, so thanks for joining us, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me. Maybe I'll be able to jump back on and actually talk about Lord of the Rings again at some point.
That would be it. Always welcome here at the Grey Havens, as I'm going to rename the show soon. All right, so make sure you tune in on Friday, where I will be playing, by popular demand, unsurprisingly, a Falco deck, Falco Boffin, the new hero, on Friday at 12 Pacific on this stream. And catch us next time for the next Teatime Tales chat, which always just pay attention to the Tales from the Cards Twitter feed, Tales FT Cards, or the Tales from the Cards Facebook page, or the Discord channel, Card by the Rings Discord channel, and then you can see the announcement for when the next one will be. Until then, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.